here we are, back again, Power and Speed.
Power and Speed.
Yep.
This crunch is running late.
Shocking.
We had to juxtapose guests around a little bit, but I think we've got that all under control.
Is that really a word?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Juxtapose. I don't know.
Something.
We got to move people around a little bit. It's not a big deal.
All right. So Mixler's working.
Mixler's working.
I got confirmation.
Yep. 908-751-0211, since Tom slacked off on that one. Continue with your spiel, Tom.
That's our number. I don't even have a spiel, but like us on Facebook, will you? Yeah, 908-751-0211. Call the show. And
can we have Alan call in to tell us that's working?
Yeah, we could have anybody call in. Preferably somebody we can make fun of.
I wish I had clipped that audio from the other way. I'll get it. I haven't.
I think you were wishing. I think you were wishing you would have clipped the audio from our phone conversation before.
Yeah, it was pretty good. All right, so we've got two guests today.
We do.
The one that I know very well is Tommy Martino.
Yep. I know Tommy very well. Also,
you probably do.
Mm-hmm.
7 national event winner, NHRA Pro Stock driver.
Hell of a driver.
Yeah, absolutely hell of a driver. And I've known Tommy for from the comp stuff. That was and a badass comp guy too.
Hell yeah,
for a long time, and
pretty badass engine builder too.
Yep. And he started. He was. I'm trying to pull this back. I looked it up today to make sure because I didn't remember which club he was in. 200 mile an hour club.
Honda Odyssey Club.
No. 200 mile an hour club. He was 14th inductee, and that was a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Not a lot of guys were going that fast.
Nope.
That's he's got an impressive resume.
Yes.
And I had a conversation with him briefly about the fuel injection side of things, and it started to get pretty good. I'm like, all right, knock it off.
Yeah.
You got to call in.
Save it.
I hear exactly what you're saying because the same thing happened to me today. I spoke to our second guest, Dale Cubic from CFM Carburetion. We have a little bit of history. He's done a couple carbs for me and for Vinny, and really, really top-notch stuff. Great guy. He's going to call in and probably, I know he's going to educate me because same thing. We were talking before, and he's rolling off these things, and I'm like, all right, let's just save this, man, because this is like exactly what we need to do.
And it's going to be unfortunate, but one of the things I'm always going to, I know the problematic stuff, like the 2 barrels are touchy and problematic.
Well, you got to ask him.
I will,
because he told me some stuff about Pro Stock that really, it didn't blow my mind because once he said it, it makes sense, but it's amazing how technologically advanced all this stuff is.
And at this point, is there any secret to the Pro Stock stuff since it's gone?
I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see.
I mean, I guess there's probably what you learn.
Till the end of the year, there probably is.
Yeah, true. Good point.
Yeah.
Till the season's over.
Yep. There's, and I'm sure that those, applications or things that you've learned, those techniques would, follow through to other classes.
Sure.
If it does comp or what.
Oh, yeah.
It's all got to be the same.
Yep. He's one of the big dogs in carburation now. I know there's, 3 or 4 names there's a lot of names.
No, what the problem is, I hate to keep saying this, but and you always say, well, it's an air pump. But some of this being relevant, if you don't do it anymore like I used to. Yep. I mean, I used to be able to tell you off the top 16 in Pro Stock and NHRA Super Stock. I'd know what happened at the event. I know who qualified where.
Yep.
I don't know it anymore.
That's because you used to hear it on Adam Carolla's show, right?
No, he was not an NHRA guy. Douchebag. Yeah. Subi. Should we get into Subi? You fruit.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Subi Fest.
Subi Fest. That's where Tom will be going. Subi Fest.
This weekend.
I got no problem with that.
Well said, Tad. And Tad's here. What's up, Thaddeus?
I'm taking the resident engineer seat. But
again, you gotta lose that line because it's your seat now, man.
I was talking to said engineer yesterday or the day before, and we were discussing the whole fuel injection rationale, and I disagreed with him. But
he really, and he didn't educate you.
I tried, but he can call in. He can verify what I said. But
well, I remember seeing a text not too long ago. Sorry, that somebody said they will never, ever call in again.
He reiterated that with me too. So
I don't think our friend Alan's going to be calling anytime soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got Dale Cubic on the line. Let me pull him in. Bibbly. Hang on. I'm going to do it up here so I don't drop him. Dale, you there?
Yes, I am.
How you doing, sir? Nice to meet you. This is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Dale. Tom. You know me, obviously.
And this is Tad, so.
And Pat?
Tad. T-A-D.
Okay, Pat. Okay.
So, Dale, we absolutely appreciate you coming on. And Mike's all excited because, I told you who Mike is before, and I know you know the name and, who his dad was. But he's excited to talk to somebody with your kind of level of expertise in carburation because he's done a little bit of work on carbs and, a lot of testing. So have at it, Mike.
I mean, Tom just threw it right on me. But do you do any two-barrel stuff? And the only reason that, look, we could talk about comp, pro stock, super stock, whatever. But the thing that was always in the last things that we were involved with, because, my father and Brian got into the two-barrel sportsman racing. And, these things were pretty potent, even back then. They'd make 500 and they'd turn 72 or 7,300. And you could have such a variance with those carburetors. It was insane. You couldn't even believe that they could be range from as good to bad, even having somebody that does them and swears they're all identical.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. I assume you're referring to 4412s?
Yes, sir.
The 500 two barrels. One of the issues with those carburetors is the casting quality. And when I do one for a customer, I may get 4 or 5 bodies from my supplier and flow them with no booster in them. And you'll see 4 to 8 CFM difference in each casting without touching the castings, because most of the class rules say that the Venturi ridge has to be completely intact.
Yep.
So you can't get in there and change that, and they have booster gauges where they check the thickness and the installation of the booster and so on and so forth. So just the fact that you can take 4 or 5 bodies and run them across the flow bench and measure the CFM at the same pressure drop, you would be absolutely amazed at how much difference there is from one casting body to the next.
And we had some very strange differences that I don't think were based as much on CFM, because we had something that if I hadn't done this 3 or 4 times, I would tell me I was making it up. We would get, and we were using carburetors from a pretty well-known guy that did a lot of two-barrel stuff, and I don't want to mention his name either one way or the other. And we used to order like 4 or 5 at a time, and inevitably we'd send 2 or 3 back that were just, off where they had to be. And realistically, not trying to pick on the circle track guys, but it really probably didn't matter. This was dirt circle track. I don't think 2 or 3 horsepower in a sportsman car was a win or loss. But we'd have some that were bad, and then somehow or another, the one guy that, did a lot of dynoing there for us, he started swapping out metering blocks and swapping them between bodies. And sometimes you could take 2 bad ones and make a good one. And it was very strange to us. And the only thing we could figure is that, maybe the speed that the air is going through, maybe it was something like a fuel bowl aeration, because the amount of fuel quantity that goes through one needle and seat. We really, it was really baffling. And the carburetor guy, he was equally as frustrated. He'd be like, look, I put these things on some of the 4-cylinder guys. I'll give them right to them. They say they're perfect. But once we got on a V8, it was touchy.
Well, you have to remember, too, that the V8 is so under-carbureted that the slightest change in the carburetor that's way too small shows up as a big problem.
Okay.
Not so critical on 4 cylinders, less as much on 6, but certainly on a V8, a 500-horse V8. And that's where that 4 CFM, 6 or 8 CFM difference in the bodies would make such a difference on an engine that was totally starved for air to begin with. You're scratching for everything you can. The other thing is that if the builder is using a cast metering block, which most of the rules say you have to, the variance in the cast shape of the main well, even though they're all tapered main well from Holley, is huge. They can vary as much as 5 thousandths. And 5 thousandths, the area of fuel in 5 thousandths of a 180 thousandths hole is pretty substantial. So I would say that there's probably so many little tolerances stacking up, and that's where you might get your bad carburetor, and you put that with another bad carburetor, parts from it, and lo and behold, you come up with something that's functional. They're very, very sensitive. They're very sensitive to booster placement. You can move the booster up 10, 15 thousandths in one of those carburetors, or down 10 and 15 thousandths and change the whole fuel curve. It's just a very finicky carburetor.
Yep, and it was an overall finicky combination, because my younger brother just texted me, because he actually is listening, and he said, don't forget moving the carburetor front to back, and how spacer sensitive they were.
I remember that. Yep.
It was crazy.
Yep.
Depending on the carburetor placement, I mean, just being a realist, you'd think that the carburetor should sit more towards the center of the manifold. Never the case.
Yep.
Never even remotely the case. And
no. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we would find massive differences moving the carburetor like a quarter of an inch and figuring out where they had to be, and massive differences in spacer, depending on, straight, tapered, radius taper. It was pretty crazy how picky they were. And then the other thing that he didn't even bring up, but I remember, is the stupid K&N flow control base always helped everything on the two barrels, always.
Yep. Anything you can do to smooth the air entry. Carburetors typically pull air in horizontally. They don't pull in air vertically much. So anything that you can do to smooth out the area around, the horizontal area around the air horn, is going to help tremendously.
Yeah, well, that we put that air cleaner on, and it was amazing. That, like, not the whole air cleaner, just the bottom.
Just the base.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just the base. Yep.
So, little secrets to the guys because we do have a lot of people from the local area that do listen, that are two-barrel guys. They're still out here, and they're still doing it.
All right, well, we're not going to waste this whole thing on two barrels. I know you want to talk about them for 2 hours, but...
Yeah, okay, look.
Dale was talking to me before.
Well, then feel free to ask questions, Tom.
No, about the Pro Stock stuff, because I said, we were talking last week about Warren Johnson selling his stuff, and Dale said something very interesting that I had no clue. He said you could buy a pair of carburetors and they could be completely wrong for you. And go ahead, Dale, just tell us a little bit about what you were telling me before, because it amazed me.
Well, unless you work on them, most people wouldn't be aware, but on most of the Pro Stock engines, I would say in the last 10 years, the carburetors are built as 8 individual carburetors. The engines have reached such a level of performance that you get into, at first it used to be staggering jets, years ago, 20, 25 years ago, and then you started to stagger air bleeds. And then as the engines progressed and they got progressively more, 2.5 horsepower per cubic inch, 2.7, 2.9, now 3.0 plus, you have to actually design an individual carburetor for each cylinder. And to the point of now in the last 5 years, it's very common, even the last 10 years, very common to have 6 or 7 different venturi sizes in the carburetors. Throttle bore sizes typically stay the same, but the flange on the booster is different, larger, smaller. The venturi size is larger, smaller. You get into a point when you're turning 10,000, 11,000 RPM where cylinders are robbing fuel from other cylinders because of firing order and so on and so forth. And these problems are expanded as the engine RPM climbs.
Yep.
And so you could buy a set of carburetors that are technically very advanced, except when you put them on your top sportsman engine, the engine will barely run. And that's because, your top sportsman engine just requires a fairly simple square jetting, square air bleed, square carburetor arrangement. And you may have as much as 50 CFM difference from one venturi and throttle bore combination to another in any of these carburetors.
Wow.
That's why in Warren's article, he mentioned something to the effect of selling them in pairs only because they wouldn't function very well individually.
And that answers that question as to why.
He's absolutely right.
Yep.
He's absolutely right in that.
That's amazing. You were also telling me about the amount of pressure on the back cylinders from the hood scoop. So I'd imagine
Sure. On a Pro Stock engine, or really any car that goes over 200 miles an hour, the hood scoop plays a huge part in fuel distribution in the intake manifold. And with most hood scoops designs nowadays, the rear of the hood scoop sees the majority of the pressure. And when a car goes over 200 miles an hour or approaches 200 miles an hour, you can build as much as 2 inches of pressure in the hood scoop in various areas of the hood scoop. Maybe more in the rear, not as much in the front. And in a Pro Stock situation where you're really, really trying to get every last ounce of, you're trying to wring every last ounce of horsepower out of it, you have a G-force issue. So when the car leaves the starting line, you have fuel in the manifold that's trying to go backwards and overfeed the rear cylinders because they're in the back. Okay? Well, when the car gets up to speed and gets into high gear and approaches 200 miles an hour, the hood scoop pressure increases in the rear, and now those rear cylinders need a bunch of fuel. But when the car leaves the starting line, they don't need a bunch of fuel because they're being fed by the front six and the 3 Gs of force. That liquid fuel that's in the plenum is moving backwards. Well, when the car gets into high gear and the G-force settles down, the fuel's not moving back to feed those cylinders. So the rear cylinders you've leaned out early in the run so that they stay clean. Now you're in high gear, hood scoop pressure is high, you have no more G-force, and lo and behold, your rear cylinders are burning up.
Yeah. So
that is a massive amount of dynamic portions to take into account.
Don't even know how you begin to manage that.
So the carburetors, the back 2 holes of a carburetor on a 500-inch car or an 826-inch mountain motor Pro Stock car, just the same way, have to be radically different in their design than the first 6, and especially the center 4.
Wow.
And that's why a set of Warren's 500-inch Pro Stock carburetors would be very technically advanced, but maybe not the best investment to just bolt on your bracket racer and go faster.
Yeah.
And what's even more amazing about this conversation is the level of performance that we're talking about here, how close all the good guys will run to one another. I mean, the level of finesse that has to go into every part. Look, we're just talking about carburetors. That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about all the other components of the car or the motor. Think about that. These guys, the good guys, the I guess we'll call them team guys that have good financial backing, they'll run extremely close to one another. That's amazing.
Yes. A 500-inch Pro Stock car would probably be one of the greatest bracket cars in the world because if you watch those cars, unless something really, really, really goes wrong, for the most part, they will repeat like they're on a string because they're super highly tuned, both engine, timing, chassis, clutch. Everything that you do with the carburetors or the tune-up affects the bell housing, and the bell housing is the boss. You take care of the bell housing first. The clutch is the most important part of the car, so you do nothing to upset the bell housing. But if everything is reasonably on par with each other, the cars will repeat numbers phenomenally like a bracket car.
I never thought of that, but it's true. You can watch a couple rounds of a Pro Stock race, and they are bracket cars.
They know exactly how fast they're going to go.
It's amazing.
Yep.
So, Dale, I know you have a couple in the top half right now. How does the new rule affect you? Obviously, you're not going to be selling Pro Stock carburetors anymore. Is that a bad thing, a good thing?
Well, I mean, it isn't a huge part of my business because the whole field of Pro Stock is fairly small.
Right.
When you get right down to it, most of the time we have like 16 cars qualifying. So it isn't like there's, a million people buying Pro Stock carburetors. But it's certainly going to have a dampening effect on my business, but for a different reason, not the monetary part of it, but the technology part of it.
I was thinking that.
There's things that you see working with a 500-inch team that you'll see nowhere else. There's conditions that carburetors are put under on a 500-inch car or an 826 car, a mount motor car, either of those two cars, that you will see nowhere else. So the technology to be able to work on those cars and design fuel curves for cylinders that are going 11,000 RPM, truly there is a trickle-down effect. It does affect even my bracket stuff, even my street stuff. It has an effect on everything I do. As with all the builders, everyone involved in Pro Stock learns from that level of technology. And that's probably going to be something I will miss. Although I don't know if it'll be fuel injected forever. We'll have to just see how it all works.
Yeah, true.
They really did kind of push these guys off a cliff in one shot. They really did.
I know.
Yeah, kind of right under the bus with snow tires on. You know what I mean? they didn't seem to cut them much slack. But we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I'm interested because I do like newer technologies. I like some of the ideas behind it, and I kind of like part of what they've done to maybe standardize some stuff to try to keep costs down. And like you said, I mean, realistically, nobody, I don't think, is really getting rich from Pro Stock.
No,
I think
no.
there's, you know, you're not making your first million doing anything with Pro Stock.
Nope.
It's just not possible. There's not enough cars. And I mean, I think what NHRA needs to focus on is trying to build the count so we get back to, you know, the 30 car fields. But I just don't know at the level that everything costs. I don't know if it's possible. I really don't.
Well, I mean, as far as my opinion on it goes, I think one of the single biggest ways they're hurting Pro Stock, and this again, this is just my opinion. It has no basis in fact, but I know that they want to take the hood scoops off the car, and you know, I don't spend my time in the stands. I spend my time working in the pits and on the starting line. But from a fan perspective, when you think of a race car, if you ask anybody, if you ask my wife, my neighbor, my dad, my mother, when they think of race car, even though they're not car people, they think of something with a big hood scoop on it. So for the fan appeal, I find it hard to believe that they're going to attract more fans with cars that are supposed to be the fastest naturally aspirated cars that have zero hood scoops on them, unless it was a factory installed bump of some kind.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I'm thinking it was less of that and more of they were catering to the. And I'm not getting on NHRA's side at all because I think they're out of their minds. But I think the big three probably had something to do with that. They wanted the cars to stop going farther and farther away from looking like some kind of crazy looking car.
I understand your point, and to some extent I agree with it. But rather than throwing two major design changes at Pro Stock in a matter of one winter. For instance, they're going to have to redesign their engines to run at a lower RPM and adapt fuel injection to them. And then they're also going to have to redesign the whole frontal area of the car to get air into the engine without a hood scoop. Okay? And that's both of those together are huge, huge investments for these teams into the millions of dollars.
Wow.
So
and that's what
if they did one year, and they did the other major change, and say, for instance, this year they said, we're going to bring on fuel injection and these other changes, but next year, not in 2016, but in 2017, the hood scoops will go. So that gives them maybe a year, and they could even do it in reverse. They could say,
probably be hard to do it in reverse.
Yeah,
I guess it'd be harder to do it in reverse, but you know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
This isn't such a hit on the team, because the well-funded teams may be able to do that, but the smaller teams without tremendous backing may be closing up shop. I mean, if they have to make these two huge monumental changes, the frontal area of the car, changing it to allow air in, and of course make the car safe at over 200 miles an hour, as well as readapting the engines to the lower RPM mandate and fuel injection. That's some pretty big stuff to do in a relatively short period of time financially.
Yeah, it really is.
So
it really is.
I guess we'll just see how it all shakes out. Again, those are just my opinions, and not necessarily right, wrong, or indifferent. That's my opinion. It just seems like an awfully big hit to accomplish in one winter cycle.
Yeah, one relatively short winter cycle. Yeah, that's for sure.
People are already testing in Florida in January, so it's really not much of a winter cycle.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and it's and this always happens. The unintended consequences of a rule change. It looks like they did put thought into this to try to stop it from getting out of control. And we had a discussion on, they limited the components to a specific manufacturer. Should it have been more than one manufacturer with a very specific set of parameters they had to operate in? Maybe. But things like it, you think about look at what you've explained about carburetor development, different size, in every location, and, what could happen with fuel injector development. I mean, you wouldn't want to have one of these guys, a privateer team, end up with a $10,000 injector in every hole. I mean, so I understand what they tried to do, but I think that, it could even potentially have a negative effect. The Pro Stock car counts could really go down.
Well, I think that's probably why Dale was saying we may not have, see the end of carburetors.
Might be right back.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. Hey, Dale, so, what else do you do? Like, what's your bread and butter there? Because, like we realized that Pro Stock isn't keeping the doors open. So what is it that you do? Plug yourself a little bit.
We do pretty much everything here. We being my wife and I have no employees. Everything I do myself with her help. It's the way we control the quality here. But I do quite a bit of traveling, unfortunately, and do a lot of on-site tuning. But ProMod is a big thing right now. They're doing the same thing that Pro Stock is, not under mandate, but some teams are using fuel injection, some teams are using carburetors. And with the amount of nitrous that the engines are using, carburetors that are just 3 or 4 years old are no longer acceptable.
Wow.
They need to be changed and downsized. And now with the latest trend of lock-up torque converters and short shifting to 911-inch or 903-inch engines, it's really thrown a big curveball into the carburetors that have been working fine for 5 years. Okay, whole new program. So carburetor size being ultra critical to a nitrous engine, right now that is an area that is being is kind of exploding for some of the top builders. We're doing quite a bit of nitrous carburetor development because some of the teams have stopped with the injection and gone back to carburetors. So they have not shown a power increase or an ET or speed increase. Some guys are very successful with the fuel injection because, as you said earlier, Tom, about moving fuel into cylinders at certain places at certain times, that's proven to be very, very beneficial with some of these nitrous engines.
Sure.
But we're also seeing now that carburetors can be adapted to run just as well once they have the right parameters. In other words, carburetors that are just 3 or 4 years old, that, like I said, were working flawlessly up until a year ago, have stopped working because they've lowered the shift RPMs of the engine, and they're lowering the torque converter lockup time of the cars, so that the engines are running much, much lower RPM early on, which causes the carburetor to lose signal and not flow fuel. Okay, so now we're having to get after the carburetors and change them substantially to recompete, or should I say compete in another arena on the same cars that 2 or 3 years ago they were flawless on.
Well, that is what pays the bills for you, though, right?
Yeah, that's a big thing right there. I do a lot of, single, the X275 stuff is really popular. The 10.5 tire stuff's really popular. Pretty much anything that goes down the drag strip, I do quite a bit of. And I work on anything.
I would like to say one thing for anybody who's listening. I can firsthand recommend this guy because a friend of mine has a 1,000 horsepower 632 big block Chevy street car, and we fought with we've been fighting with carburetors forever, and we got one of Dale's. I don't know, what do you call that thing? The 1150. It's a bracket carburetor.
Well, that particular carburetor I did for you is like my Pro Street 1150. There's a lot of 1,000 horsepower engines driving around on the street. You wouldn't believe it.
Yep.
So a couple of years ago, a friend of mine approached me and he says, "Hey, I've got a 615 that I street drive, and I just can't get a carburetor for it. Will you help me?" So I started building them some stuff, and we played played with some different combinations, found one that worked really well, and I've been kind of tweaking it in the last 5 years. But it's pretty much a drop on and go. It's good for part throttle operation. It's smooth off idle, and yet it'll feed a 1,000 horsepower engine very easily. It is a 2-circuit carburetor. We've eliminated that, so it's clean on the mid-range. But when you have 1,000 horsepower on the street, if you give up a few horsepower because you don't have an intermediate circuit, it's not a big deal.
No, it's not. And so I was going to attest to the fact that we put this thing on, and it started, and it idles unbelievably at 800, 900 RPM, and it drives like your street car would drive. And the only real problem we have is the car never has traction. Ever. Never, ever. The carburetor is unbelievable. So I thank you for that.
An engine builder friend of mine asked me why I was building a street engine with 800 horsepower. I said, because I can. And he said, don't you understand? You can't have any fun with 800 horsepower on the street. When you stab the throttle, all you'll do is spin in circles.
Yeah, it's true. So at 1,000, you're just 200 worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just spin faster in circles.
Exactly.
What's not fun about that?
Yeah, it is fun. But yeah, anybody listening, you need a carburetor, this is the place to call. I'm telling you.
So why don't you give out your phone number so that everybody's got you if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, the number at the shop here is 330-723-5688.
Yep. And it looks like I've got the website pulled up here at cfmperfcarbs.com. And I can tell you, sir, I wish I knew you when I was doing the 2-barrel stuff because I would have liked to really sat down and got over some of this, because you're one of the only guys I've ever talked to that has this good of a handle on it. And I mean, we've tried a lot of it back in the past. I remember a very, very big carburetor manufacturer talked to us. They actually reached out to us and said, look, we've got a really good 2-barrel program. You should try it. And they guaranteed me 20. Well, it was 20 the wrong way. And then sent it back and it got better. It was like 10 the wrong way. And I think we got into about maybe 5 or 6. We never really got to where a real good one was. And it was finally they gave up. I got to give them credit. They gave up. But yeah, this has been a great conversation. I'm really glad you called in.
Yep, me too.
Well, it was fun for me too, and certainly if you guys have questions, give me a call. If there's anything else any other questions I can answer for you, whether it's on the phone or online like this, by all means, call.
Well, yeah, if our listeners call, or we guys email us questions or Facebook us questions, you're going to be our go-to carburetor guy now.
Absolutely.
If you'll have us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a Facebook page. My wife, bless her heart, she kind of monitors it, and quite a few people contact us through CFM Facebook page, as well as sending me emails, because I guess I'm pretty easy to find out there with my website and so forth. So, yeah, by all means, call anytime, and I'll do my best to explain to you whatever your question is.
All right.
Well, cool. Well, we appreciate your time, Dale. Really, I owe you one for this.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it, actually. I mean, it's nice to hear this level of detail, and I hope everybody listening, really paid attention to how intricate some of this stuff really gets.
Tonight you learned something.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, cool. Thanks again, Dale, and I think you're going to be on again if you'll have us, like I said.
Okay. All right.
All right?
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks again. Wow, that's a sharp dude.
I told you.
That's a sharp
I know you don't
dude.
trust me a lot of the time because, I'm not the sharpest guy in the world, but he's a sharp dude.
That lot of very good, interesting information on the Pro Stock stuff that I wouldn't even know where to begin.
I know, and you were pretty into it. Not the Pro Stock stuff, but you were pretty into the carburetor stuff, and he taught me some stuff today.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But I guess part of this, and I'm sure it's probably common knowledge in those circles. Like certain nuances to the carburetor. I don't think he revealed any big speed secrets.
Well, not with 20 people that try to get into a Pro Stock field, but I would bet none of our listeners knew a lot of that stuff.
Well, not the 2-barrel stuff, but
no, probably not. But I guarantee you that this guy who's on hold,
this guy
knows all about this.
Yes.
We got Tommy Martino. Let me bring him in. Tommy, you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
We got Tom from Manly, who I know you know.
What's up, Tom?
How you doing, Mr. Rosanna?
I'm doing good, man. Good to talk to you.
And I found it so humorous, and I had to tell Tad, I said, Tommy remembered you. And I said, I don't know if that was good or bad.
good or bad, right?
It was good, Pat.
Yeah. As long as it's not like FUD. So
Yeah. So we started to have a conversation today about where Pro Stock is heading with the rule changes, and you had some insights. I guess we'd use the term as, say, a privateer.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, and I didn't realize some of the things that you brought up to me. And like we started talking about single injector choice and hood scoops and manifolds. And I mean, how do you think this is all going to affect, the Pro Stock field as it stands?
Well, I'm actually afraid that it's going to cripple it a little more than it has. We've had a fall off due to the economy of what I call the privateers, like you just said. I always call them the fringe pro stock guys. The guys on the East Coast that race about 10 or 12 races no further west than Indy. The guys on the West Coast that do the races in Topeka and in Washington and California and Texas. That end up in the day made up a 24-car field. Well, the economy got tight, and the cost of racing, due to no one's fault than ingenuity, rose and got a little out of control. So it went from having 20 to 24 cars to having 16, 17, 18 cars. Now they instituted these rules that you guys have been talking about, and listen, I'm not against change. I'm an old carburetor guy, but you know what? There's not a car manufacturer today with a carburetor on it anymore. You go to a parts store, ask for a carburetor gasket kit. The guy looks at you. Are you from the Stone Ages?
Yep.
So fuel injection doesn't scare me. Even though I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to it, I just felt like the class is struggling right now for full fields, that we could have went to fuel injection, and I would have welcomed it. And I welcome the changes now and do everything in my power if we were to go back racing again to embrace it. But they made it so you had to do so many things, no hood scoop, revamp the cars, different manifolds, in order to fit underneath the hood itself. They changed the RPM range, which is good for the privateer, so to speak. But the fact that we can't have a hood scoop really does not enable us to use manifolds we have existing. Then they mandated that we had to use the Holley components exclusively. I'm a Holley guy. They took very good care of me when I raced full time, and I think they make a wonderful product. But Pro Stock was built on what you could get out of it. I understand their thought process was they didn't want Formula One technology and pricing to come into Pro Stock, but they could have got 2 or 3 comparatively priced components. Give us a choice. Okay, I want to run a Holley because I'm loyal to them. Someone else might want to run, big stuff or whatever. They limit that. I'm an NHRA guy. They treat me very well. I would never bash them. I just felt like they backed the little guy in the corner. They made it harder for the Tom Martinos, the Bob Benzes, the guys on the West Coast like Dave River and what have you, Steve Kolowski, to come back out and race, because now we have to change our cars. I personally still have 4 Pro Stock motors. It's 4 manifolds at $4,000 a piece. If the first ones we do are okay, but let's just say they are. 4 systems at $7,000 plus a piece our cost. They really put us back. Now we have to work a little harder on our funding in order to go race. From that aspect, I don't welcome the change, because I think the class is struggling now. We didn't need to make it harder for the fringe racers to come and race their 8, 9, 10 races a year.
Right.
But we'll see in Pomona how it has. I had spoke to Mike a little earlier, and I thought that maybe they should have gave us throttle bodies, went to fuel injection, even if it was a part numbered one that we had to use, and an ECU that was only the one they wanted. But maybe we didn't need to get rid of the hood scoops just yet. Let us walk a little bit. Tell everybody, hey, listen, by 2016, no hood scoops.
Yeah, because the no hood scoop thing is actually probably one of the things that interested me the most, because you've got so much work that went into manifold as far as tuning, runner length, and now you've not only changed the configuration of how the manifold has to be to fit under the car, because I don't think you could just put a top on one of those manifolds and get them in under the hood. The whole manifold configuration is going to be different.
You hit the nail on the head. You're exactly right. And besides the manifold configuration being different, now we have to engineer it to fit it under the confines of a flat hood. I understand where they're coming from. They want the younger generation doesn't remember Pro Stocks have had hood scoops forever. So we want to try to bring some of the younger fans in and let them look at a Camaro or a Dart or the Mustang and have a flat hood, whether it be a little cowl type hood or whatever. I get it, but we could have transitioned to that. It transitioned into that. I felt a little easier. Maybe limit to not an 11-inch hood scoop. Maybe for this year we're only allowed a 7 or 8-inch hood scoop, and 2016, flat hoods. There's only 70 some odd days. I don't know the exact number right now because I haven't raced professionally in a while, but there's only 70 some odd days between Pomona and Pomona. Pomona, the World Finals, and Pomona, the Winter Nationals.
What's so funny is we just talked about that it's a short winter break. We just talked about that. And if that's how many days it is, that's a lot to turn around. And I mean, not to say the teams probably wouldn't start working on this stuff now, while they're still racing, but it takes your focus away.
When I raced you hit the nail on the head again. When I raced full time, we made all the hay we can make in the winter months as far as power and testing. And during the summer, during the season, we hoped to maintain and maybe find a little bit because your focus is on racing and doing what you need to do to stay competitive. R&D is Michael, your dad was probably one of the smartest men I've ever talked to when it comes to engine building. If he raced full time, his brain would not have been thinking the same way it thought when he sat there only thinking about how to make more power out of those super stock engines, their stock engines, their comp motors, whatever project he happened to be working on. Because your main focus is, hey, Thursday I need to be competitive.
Right.
So what I have, I need to make the best I can at the moment. So now you have the race teams. We generally tested, the touring pros test the week after the trade show, which is the second week in December. Well, I don't see that happening right now.
Yeah. It's a tight schedule, and it's that's the other thing. This is a very demanding set of events. It really like you said, to run the entire Pro Stock tour, so to speak, the NHRA tour. This isn't something that you could just do because you feel like it. I mean, this is something you need to be dedicated to do.
Tom, do you have any of the parts yet? Are you testing with them?
No, we have not done anything.
Wow.
At all. I'm actually taking a little wait and see kind of thing. I'm half hoping that maybe they relax some of the rules, hood scoop wise, whatever. And if they don't, I am gonna get after it. We're gonna right now, from what I understand, I am still very close friends. I just happen to be in at Indy at the U.S. Nationals and work with V Games the entire weekend. They have plenty of parts on order. The supply is not plentiful. They're having a hard time getting parts. They do not have a complete system yet.
Wow.
And I believe that because there was one thing that I picked up on in the NHRA release, speaking about, I think it was injectors. They said that, they wouldn't allow teams to have duplicates until they were sure that everybody that needed a set had them.
Right.
So that was a little telling. Like, that made me think that they're a little further behind than we would like to believe.
As of Labor Day weekend, V Gaines, who was I'm not going to say money's no object because that sounds crazy, but V Gaines does not have a system because it's $7,000 and he can't buy it. He doesn't have a system because he cannot get all the parts yet.
Right.
So even if you want to do some preliminary testing, at least get a motor up and running and say, okay, wow, this is what it's going to do. Let's sit back and see what we need to do to move forward. They haven't even fired one up yet. I was talking to Jason Lime a little there about it, and they haven't. They're still waiting on components also. And I didn't get into details with him of how close they are to having all the components or not, but He told me as of then they did not have a complete system yet.
Wow. And, you think about the kind of the wholesale changes, the changes that probably not everybody realize affect things. I mean, I could be wrong, and you could certainly better answer this than I could, but I would think that everything you tried to do in Pro Stock was make more power and probably make it higher, correct?
Well, and that's what actually has moved why we didn't come out this past year at all. You really needed to turn the motors between 10.8 and 11,200, which sounds crazy for a 500-inch engine with 92-gram valves and 4 750 bores, huge pistons and stuff. But that's what they're doing. And you're exactly right. Now on top of everything, now that everyone says, okay, our valve train does this, our cams do that, we're going to go to fuel injection, and by the way, you can't turn them more than 10,500 anymore. Right.
So a lot of the research and development you did to get the additional RPM to use multiplication is gone.
Right. So now not only are you R&Ding a completely new induction system, and I think the manifolds, I think that the gentlemen that do the manifolds are smart enough that they're going to hit it pretty close to start, and manifolds are a constant R&D project anyway. If the top team put their first manifold on and they made exactly the same, if they picked up 10 horsepower, they're building another one immediately to try to pick up another 10. So,
sure.
But now the harder thing I think the top teams are going to have, these guys are turning these engines in excess of 11,000. Well, now it's a 10,500 hard limiter, which means you're only going to turn it like 10,450 tops. So you're talking about lowering something 900 RPM. Well, your camshaft thought process, your port size, Michael, you're a competent engine builder. If you built something to turn 9,000 and built something to turn 10,000, it wouldn't be the same port, cam, or what have you.
No, cam ramp aggressiveness, right. All the thought of the valve train changes. That one parameter, that's what I mean. That one RPM parameter changes an awful lot of things. I mean, everything, manifold, it changes everything.
Color.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Funny, Tom. Yeah, it's a big move for them.
Oh,
I just hope, my biggest hope is I'd still like to get involved and race, somewhere between 6 and 11 races a year. I just hope that it doesn't cripple the class so hard that it goes away.
Yeah, and
Pro Stock will go away, but I mean Pro Stock as I know it goes away.
Yeah, it is a potential for a problem. What?
Well, here's my one thought though: with the no hood scoop, new manifold, new fuel injection, instead of having a hood scoop one more year and then let you cut, you'd have to redesign everything again. So this is one big shot. You got to do it all in one, even though it seems like a big shot, no hood scoop, fuel injection. At least there's not going to be next year. You're not going to have to.
Have you ever been around a team in the off season that's going to try to win a championship the following year?
Oh no, but
we burned the last year that I raced full time. We burned 15 55-gallon drums of fuel on the dyno testing things.
Wow. Yep.
I'm just saying, I only meant to give the Pro Stock guys more time to still be competitive.
Right.
It's going to have, the guys that have a lot of money are just going to hire more people and do more. A guy that's spending $1 million a year is going to fall by the wayside. The guys that are spending $2 million a year will just spend $2.5 million, and it's going to separate the field more. I think the biggest attraction of Pro Stock over the years is the fact that if you're standing by the finish line, you don't look up at the win light to see who won. At least 8 out of 10 times, you don't know.
Yeah, it is that, and it's close, amazing. Yeah. We just talked about that too. It's amazing that different teams, different. I want to use the terms maybe thought processes or different brains, different hands working on the same class of car, have all dialed them in to be so close to one another. It truly is amazing. It really is. It's impressive.
Ralph said something to me back in, I think it was like 97 or 98. We came back from a race, and number 1 through 16 was 31 hundredths of a second. And he says, 16 different drivers, 16 different clutches, 16 different sets of headers. He said, let's just say every single engine, hardcore part of the engine was exactly the same. Just the accessories, 16 different sets of tires. We all know each set of tires is a little different. How do we all make the changes for the cars to be all that close? That's what Pro Stock is.
That's crazy when you think about it. Literally crazy.
Well, someone did a gentleman used to do an article every year from the Asbury Park Press, and he took Englishtown on a Monday, and there was 27 Pro Stock cars that tried to qualify. Obviously, 16 qualify. Number 1 through, I think it was 25. There was 2 guys that really didn't really run at all, ETs at all. If you lined them up at the finish line, there was a car and a half difference from number 1 to number 25.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It was I have the article.
Some serious competition.
It blew me away. I'm thinking, there's no way. And I actually called him. His name was Don Wilno. I called him. He says, no. He says, I had a mathematician figure out the speed, the travel, the length of the car, a car and a half and 25 cars. So all 25 of us lined up and went to the finish line. The fastest guy would have been cross first. The last guy would have been a car and a half behind.
Now, let me ask you a question. What do you think if this whole fuel injection thing goes through? Do you think it's going to separate the field for a little bit? Like, do you think there's going to be guys that really got on it and guys that are missing it a little bit?
That's what I was just relating to.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to go through. I pretty much have a pretty good hand on the pulse. NHRA has been very good to me, and I really get along very well with those guys. It's going through. I'm hoping maybe they make a few little concessions to their end result of what they want, but maybe make it a little easier in transition. But even if they don't, it is definitely gonna separate. Like I says, it probably costs, if you have an in-house engine program, on the cheap, you're probably spending $1.5 million a year to race.
Wow.
B Gaines told me he has it itemized. It's going to cost him $500,000 to change this over to stay as competitive as he is. So the top teams are probably already spending $2.5 to $2.7 million a year. So they're going to, another $500,000 to them is nothing. Not that it's nothing, but they could afford to do it. The guys that only spending $1 million, you know what? They're gonna pot along, and instead of being 300s behind the we call them the goons, they're going to be 500s behind the goons.
Yeah.
And all I hope is that they want to persevere and move forward and catch up. I hope that we don't lose them. I hope they stay long enough, to catch back up to where they were.
Hey, Tom, how far off do you think the engine programs are going to be? Like on day one, when people start to mess with these things, how far down do you think they'll be? If you had a guess.
I have the name of my company is MB Race Engines, and I have my right-hand man is Bob Cave. He worked on me in a Pro Stock team, from the second year that I started racing Pro Stock on. And we talk about that all the time.
I could actually picture those conversations because I could picture those conversations at the old shop.
Oh yeah, there's a few 4-letter words.
Yeah,
but I think he thinks the top teams are going to run almost as good right from the get-go. I actually think that if the average ET at Pomona was going to be 755, let's say, I think they're going to go 60. He thinks they're only going to lose 100. I think by the end of the year, if the average ET at Pomona was going to be 655, they're going to go 653. Because I do believe that it will make the engines better. Mike, you were one of the first guys in the area to fool around with that stuff. The motors will be better.
Ultimately, they will.
It's a matter of right.
Yeah, we said that too.
Right. It's just a matter of them figuring it out. So it's gonna net positive. The reason why I don't think it's gonna net, you're not gonna see as much a positive is the RPM rule. And not that I'm against the RPM rule, but in the engine, let's just say a Pro Stock engine makes 1,500 horsepower as round numbers, and you run right now, let's just say they're running a 5.0 gear. I mean, they're in the neighborhood of 570s nowadays. But let's say they're running a 5.0 gear. Well, now they're only going to be able to run a 470 gear, because they're only going to turn it 10,500 in the track instead of 11,400.
Yep.
That rear tire only knows that gear multiplication. So they're going to have to make more power in order for the car to be as fast as they are now. I think that the RPM is going to slow the cars down more than the electronic fuel injection.
Yeah, because it's twofold. It's the RPM, it's the gear change. Like what you have to do multiplication wise to get down the track.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. From the 60-foot clock, the 60 foot won't change because I mean, if you wanted a 13-to-1 low gear, you're still going to get a 13-to-1 low gear. You're just going to put more. You're going to stack more low gear in it. Go with the rear gear to have your 13-to-1. But from the 330 clock to the finish line, you're losing that gear multiplication.
Yep.
You have to get back to 1-to-1 at some point on that racetrack.
And I know you're doing motors for all kinds of classes now, and I guarantee you this is something that you probably have a hard time with some of the circle track guys. They just.
Well, my circle track guys. I've been doing circle track motors for quite a time now, and there's been I think 15 races at Wall Stadium. I think there was only one time where we didn't have a guy in the top 3, and I think we've won 9 of those 15, and we've had first, second, and third more than one time. And it took a while for me to convince them that we learned how to make power. So they're 72 to 7,500 RPM motors. I got them turning 78, 79, 8,000. It took me forever to convince them that gear, I can't make as much power as you putting 10 more points of gear in the back of that car.
I know, and we had that with every one of the circle track guys. We had that conversation. Yep. We'd explain to them, why do you think Formula One motors turn so high? And just
because they can.
It's just tough.
Yep.
Exactly. Listen, when you step on the gas and you have a 583 instead of a 567, I promise you, that rear tire doesn't know that you're down 10 horsepower. I can't make that power, Oh, we can't get bite. Figure out how to get bite.
Yeah, work it out.
Yep.
I can't.
I remember my father, we had a few customers at one time in the shop, and I remember my father writing on, the whiteboard that used to sit like right between the two doors, and he did the math for the guys to try to explain, wrote it out to try to explain to them how much more power, if we're just going to talk about the back tires, what's getting here. And they're like, yeah, I get it. And then they go to the track and they take 50 points of gear out to hook it up.
Nobody home.
Wall Stadium 2 weeks ago, and I happen to own one motor I use as my R&D piece because it's hard. Those guys are lower budget. It's hard to say, listen, I want to try this. It's going to cost X amount. I'm not sure if it's good. So I do it on my R&D piece, so it's a little better. Then I could go to say, hey, listen, this is what we got. It's better, And I got to take some gear out. I can't get any forward bite. That cam accelerates so fast. So I just worked and spent all that money and
so you could kill it
and more acceleration, so you could take gear out to get back to where you are. I says you're not changing the rear gear. I don't care. You could lose. I say they move the panel bar a little bit, little wedge, come back in. Oh my God, this thing comes off the corner. Wow, you're kidding me.
Yeah,
why don't we take some gear out for the feature?
I know, it's maddening, isn't it? It was the single largest adjustment that we had.
So I'm
yeah, you stay calm.
Tommy, I know. I don't know if you've actually ever met this gentleman. His name is Crunch. He just came in. He's normally here with us every week, but he got tied up with traffic and with work. So. And I know he wanted to ask you one or two things. Go ahead, Crunch. Say hi.
How are you, Tommy?
I'm doing great.
Here's a question for you. We always have beautiful guests on here that are known for what they do. It always goes back to the grassroots of a car guy. So I'm going to ask you, you're from New Jersey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know where the hole is, right?
Never been there.
I just wanted to hear you say.
Never been there or spent more Friday and Saturday nights there than I'd like to admit to.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to hear from you. your grassroots from street racing or grudge racing for cash, and what you knew about it and how it affected you when you were younger and
Tommy,
just starting out.
that is an interesting question because honestly, as long as I've known you, I don't know how you got into this. I really don't.
Well,
Yeah, we thought he was born a comp racer.
Yeah.
well, I went to my first street race. Stu Rogers. I don't know if you remember Crunch, guy by the name of Hut, and Mac used to drive the car.
Yeah. Hut had a Camaro.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So he says to me, "Tom, we're going to go to 150th Street in New York and race Fast Charles for whatever the money was. I forget, and I don't want to just make a story up." So I said, "Sure, I'll go." 150th Street was the overpass. It was the Sunrise Highway.
Right.
I did not get out of the station wagon because I'm not afraid of anything. I was not getting out of the car, and I'm sure you've been there.
Right. Yeah, that's in New York.
Yes. Yeah. But we were both from Jersey. I mean, Fast Charles drove for the Little Twins, and they were both from Jersey.
Right.
But New York was where they were racing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I knew some grassroots were in you.
Yeah. No, my dad was very good to me. He helped me get my first car together, and all he ever said to me said, my car that I drove when I was 17 years old would run 11.3s in complete street form, which by today's standards in these new Copos and Mustangs is dirt slow, but at the time that was a pretty impressive car. And he said, "Listen, you have a car that's the baddest thing around. I can't expect you're not going to fool around a little on the street. All I ask you is for you not to street race. If you want to race, go to the track."
Right.
And you know what? I respect him enough that I did not street race. I was involved in street, with guys with street racers.
Right.
But I never street raced, and actually that's how I did get involved. I went to Englishtown and was doing very well. I think my dad was jealous, and I was only 17 at the time. You had to be 18 to drive, and they proofed me, so he got to drive my car until my 18th birthday. And I came back the following year when I was 18 and won the points championship at Englishtown, and then was very, very lucky to meet one of Michael's father's partners, Tom Kling, and I badgered him enough to go competition eliminator racing, and I was lucky enough to have people like Ralph Troopy and Tom Kling move me forward on a fast track. The only thing I was good at was driving the car. I knew everything. You could ask me at the time, 'cause I knew everything, but really they probably knew just a little more than me.
Yeah, probably.
So.
That's cool. Well,
and I got lucky enough that but once again I badgered Tom Kling enough that I wanted to race Pro Stock, and it was easier for him to give in than to listen to me bother him so much. And, we got exceptionally lucky and hit things at the right time.
I actually looked up a few things because, as you know, it's messed up that you know what your friends accomplished, but you don't keep a mental catalog of it. Like I couldn't, I had to look to see how many Pro Stock events you won. And I knew you were somewhere in the clubs for being one of the first 16 somewhere. And I had to go look that up too. And, I think back and I look at all the stuff, and one conversation I actually talked about on the air. I remember when you were running, I guess, Comp B, that was what you got out of and got in the Pro Stock car. And you had gone a little faster. And I remember asking you, did it seem different? And you're like, different world.
Oh, yeah. I remember the first run I made in Pro Stock. We went down to Houston it was a Super Bowl race, they called it. It was the day, it happened the Saturday night before the Super Bowl on Sunday. And a friend of mine, Paul Mareshi, was on my crew. And we drove straight down there, and Tom Kling flew in. and we weren't going to make a run on Friday. We were just going to get there. Of course, we got there early enough, and it was early enough to make a run. So we go up there, and I make a run. The car stands up. It's our first run ever in Pro Stock. So I go to do my first burnout, which is completely different. Back in those days, in comp preliminary, you couldn't burn out across the starting line. So I never did a burnout before. I pull in the water. Every Pro Stock guy, because I was friendly with them, because I worked for Jessel Valve Train at the time, so I knew them all. They all walk up to the starting line. I'm thinking, it's just like no pressure here. They're just making fun of me. So I was lucky enough not to look like too much of an idiot on the burnout. I don't know if it was a good burnout, bad, or whatever. I didn't take a lot of ribbing, so it almost had to be okay. And I make a run, and we only hope to go 7:17. Back in that day, no one was in the sixes. 7:17, 7:20, we'd have been really happy. And I had been 7:27 and be altered. So it left, it stood up, went to the left a little bit. I straightened it out. I just was trying to straighten it out. I didn't want to shut it off while I was going crooked. I got into fourth gear and it straightened itself out. And I thought, I might as well go to the end now. I went to the end. When I put that thing in fifth gear, it was like, oh my God, what a difference. So they come down to get me, and Paulie says, he said, "Where do you think you went?" I said, "I don't know. I was all over the track." I said, "I probably should have shut it off in second gear." He goes, "Well, take a guess." I said, "I don't know, 7:25." He goes, "No, a little better than that." I said, 7:20. He goes, "No, I said 7:17." He goes, "Skip the teens." I said, "You're kidding me." I went 7:09 on the first run.
Wow.
Okay.
I remember that exact conversation. I remember exactly where I was sitting when we had that exact conversation. I remember that.
Warren Johnson comes over to me and he goes, "These things should get away from you in a hurry." I said, are you telling me I overdrove a little bit? He goes, "I'm just telling you they get away from you in a hurry." I said, "Okay." Which, for whatever reason, Warren was liking to me from the get-go, which he doesn't really cozy up to many people.
Anybody. Just you.
Right. So we said, I said, "You want to make another run?" We said, "Of course, why not?" So we threw some weight on the nose. No one is getting down the track. Steve Schmidt, still a good friend of mine to this day, he comes back to me and says, "Tommy," says, "the dew is setting in. This place has at night, we're at Houston, the dew sets in, it's a little tricky." I said, "All right, I appreciate it, Steve." I said, "I need a little practice staging and leaving." I said, "I'm just going to go 1-2 and shut it off." He said, "Okay." And he was only being concerned. So Bob Glidden was the only one that got down the track in front of us, and he used up both lanes. So I'm thinking, well, Bob Glidden can't get down. I'm going to be real careful. I went 698 straight as a string.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Down the end, I said, "This isn't that hard." I didn't say that to the Pro Stock. I said to Tommy Kling and Paul. So, but I happen to have had a really good car. Some cars are just better than others. I know people say that, and you say they're all pipe, you can make them all good. That car made me look good.
Yep. And it spoiled you. You figured, like exactly what you said. This isn't so hard. We'll be fine. And then inevitably the handle falls off somewhere along the line.
Yeah. You're sooner than you want it to, trust me. And you can't find the handle.
Yep. Well, Tommy, I got to tell you, I really appreciate you calling. And one thing you got to do is plug your business. Let people know how to get in touch with you. I mean, it'll always help because a lot of South Jersey people listen to this too. That race at the various tracks.
We do an awful lot of street rod stuff. We do modular stuff. We do a lot of LS stuff. It's MB race engines. Come visit us on the website. We build competition eliminator motors. We just finished up a C Ultimate motor for Art Hodges, and it's pretty hateful. He run 189 miles an hour, 724, and over 3,000 feet of air in C Ultimate. We had the record, and the guy just took it back from us last week. And we have the record in C Drash automatic. Tim Kimbrough runs our stuff. Vinny Barone's been running my stuff for the last 4 years now. It's called MB Race Engines. It's phone number 732-919-0024. We do everything from street rods all the way up to Pro Stock. We don't turn anything away, and we also have no issue with trying to steer someone in the right direction, even if we're not going to build their engine. We don't try to oversell. We lose some jobs because people want more than what we're capable of giving them, or something we feel that isn't something that they should have, not because they're not capable, but it's spending their money in an area where they shouldn't spend it, for the amount of reward they're going to get. So we're very busy, and so we're lucky enough to be able to do that, not just take every single job or try to get it, but it's MB Race Engines, and you can look at it at mbraceengines.com and give us a call.
Yeah, absolutely, Tommy. That's great. And where are you? Are you, I get it right, you're on Hurley Pond Road?
Right on Hurley Pond Road. I'm about a half a mile from Wall Stadium.
Okay.
Right off of Route 34, you come down Hurley Pond Road, and it's 5134 West Hurley Pond Road.
Okay. Yeah, I was eyeing up your pictures on your Facebook and was looking at the dyno. I say, oh boy, this is what it's like when you can start from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually can roll the motors in pretty easy. We don't have to use the wall as our guide.
Yep. Remember that? Oh boy, God, you're bringing back memories.
Yeah.
I got to tell you one last thing. The one last story that I've told people is the time that Tommy Kling shut a motor off and it kicked back through the carburetors and blew the manifold apart. And of all nights, my father had to be coming back, and he comes back, and there's fire trucks and everything. Man, so many crazy things.
I thought the place was a goner. I went to you. We were trying to push whoever's cut. You had a yellow Corvette in the bay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm figuring Ralph probably has insurance for the building, but who knows what he has for his customer's car. I figured it was done. Tommy Kling and Jerry Stinner put that fire out. I figured it was over.
Yeah.
And I just tried to push the gentleman's car out the garage.
Amazing.
I'm so afraid of fire that day.
Yep. And I got to tell you, the other funny thing is my brother, Brian knew you were calling today, and he's like, you ought to ask him if he ever got pulled over for driving across the grass in Greenbrook.
Never.
Oh boy.
I never, and I was never in the hole.
Nope.
Down in North.
Nope.
And
Smart man.
I don't even know where Greenbrook is.
I hear you. All right, Tommy. Well, thanks, and we'll get all your information up on the pages so there's actually clickable links, and I do appreciate the conversation.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to me. Anytime you have any questions, I'd love to talk.
I appreciate it. Thanks, you, Tommy.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
He's an entertaining fellow, let me tell you.
Man, we had two smart guys on.
I know.
Damn.
Makes us look like idiots.
Yeah, well, we kind of are.
All these guys, and, Tommy, he said the right things about his engine shop, but that's one of the things that's the key. I can't tell you how many people have always said, well, engine builders are crooks. They'll screw you. None of them are any good.
Yeah. When
a guy tells you, don't buy that.
Right. Or you're spending your money in the wrong direction.
Right. You don't need that. That's a good guy.
Yeah. And he actually does that. I mean, we know Tommy. That's how he is.
Yeah.
He would rather send you in the right direction than just take a bunch of money from you.
Yeah.
Good guy. Really good guy.
Yeah, and that carburetor stuff, man, I was listening on my way here. Wow.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there thinking, I thought I knew a lot.
Very, very sharp. And you know what? I mean, it was nice to see we had a fair amount of live listeners, but I hope that a lot of people listen to this because there's definitely some stuff to be learned there, at least to understand where this goes. And
no doubt.
With Tommy, with the Pro Stock stuff, he's right about all the changes occurring at once. But I mean,
Dale said the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't even get into, okay, look, the guys are going to hit it right on manifold. But, what happens because the fuel is no longer in the whole manifold? It's farther down in the runner where injector is going to get placed. There's a lot more variables. Carburetors kind of only go on top of a manifold. The fuel injector could probably go anywhere.
Yeah, but if you think about it, they have 70 days. So,
yeah,
it'll be okay.
No sweat.
I was thinking to myself, though, why didn't they allow the carburetor guys to stay carburetor and mix it with the fuel injection and let them run until they could phase the carburetor out? Why didn't they do that?
I think it would have been
the hood scoop too.
I think the ideal situation here would have been to tell the guys that these are the rules for not this year, but for the next year. And I know exactly what Tommy said. It's when, like he said, when over the winter, when they were dynoing at our place, because they didn't have a dyno adjustable, they didn't have anything to use. It was a lot of dynoing, a lot. And
this crunch here, he said they burnt 15 drums of fuel.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's all the research and everything.
50-gallon drums.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
a lot of gas, man.
That's the research you do in the beginning. And it's not to say And maybe this benefits the higher dollar teams first. If guys had more money, they could afford to do more research.
Definitely does.
And while the regular racing is going on. But, you know, everybody's got their best guys that,
Right.
like, if they had a team of people, this guy who's at the racetrack helping would really be better off back at the shop on the dyno. But, you know, it's a tough thing. But I think that the time, 70 days or so, to convert the cars, to turn everything around, hit it right. And now, look, I was figuring that maybe some of these people were trying to test, or maybe some of the guys
The big teams are probably testing now.
Yeah, but like you said, if
The little guys aren't.
if they can't get parts and it's not lack of money, it's
No, I mean, no, they're probably at the wind tunnel testing entry.
the stuff they can.
Yeah, the stuff they can. They have to be. They cannot do that in 70 days.
No, but I think a bunch of things like manifold, you can't test that without the stuff on a dyno.
No.
Now,
I think they're probably just doing body stuff.
Here's my thought. Now, popular opinion is that they're not going to come in as fast as before with fuel injection. What happens if they come in and surpass the fuel, the carburetor maximums and highest expectations by a long shot?
If there was anything that was an argument against that happening, or a reason why it won't happen, it is the RPM limit.
The limit on RPM.
Yeah, that's a big, and I mean that was something I'm glad Tommy brought up and talked about, because that's a
That's
big
a horsepower
change.
kill.
Well, you talk about 900 RPM that you can't use gear multiplication for. So you have to, it's an exponential calculation to figure out how much power you need to overcome that. And it's
Right.
probably big.
Yeah, I mean when you put another X amount of points in numerically in the rear end gear, if your rear end gear was a calculator working with what was coming out of the motor, you just got that more out the other side.
Yeah, that much happier.
That's why it was always a race to try to get these things to turn harder and harder and harder. Just like
Right.
Tad will tell you, Formula One, they were up to what, 18, 20?
22,000.
22,000.
22,000.
And how do they make 800 horsepower at 22,000? Well, that's how they do
That's
it.
how they do it.
So, I mean, if Pro Stock could have figured out a way, like I guarantee you, if a Pro Stock guy tomorrow had woken up and said, oh my God, I can make my motor peak at 12.5, it would be a different ballgame.
Yeah.
Like the people would be trying to figure out what he did for months.
Okay, well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens as soon as it hits next year.
You know what interests me?
Wow.
I wonder if anybody is going to like us on Facebook tonight.
There you go. You know, we didn't even give out phone numbers or anything because it was just the conversation was too good. And I don't
It really
know.
was.
I don't know how good a guest would have been dealing with not saying the callers are bad, but it was
Plugs.
And I'm glad we didn't buy those carburetors
Yeah, right?
because it turned out we would have been up shit's creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yep. No, I think it was very good. I think it was very informative, and hopefully everybody, you know, gets to actually listen to this one on
Yep.
on iTunes, or, you know, whatever your listening choice is. It'll be up on SoundCloud, whatever.
If you got an Android, like some of us.
Yeah,
idiots.
some people are just a little goofy. That's all.
Good
All
night,
right.
everybody.
I guess that's it. Thanks, guys.